Hey yo, wanna know the genetics of all the Cattails Wildwood characters? Me too, let's go. I know this one wasn't on the official list. By the way, there's an official list. Check the description, I always link it in these. But I've been back into Cattails lately and recently posted a Let's Play episode, and I'm always thinking about the genetics of any cat I look at ever, so I figured this would be a fun video to throw together real quick. This is gonna work a little bit differently than my other genetically realistic videos, since this isn't one big family tree, but rather a bunch of individual cats and a couple of their kids, so less of a family tree and more like a bunch of tiny family bushes. This is intended to be kind of a lower effort video. My rules aren't as strict, and I did not draw heads for everyone, apologies for that, but I think you'll like what I did draw later. Winky face. So, first things first, I'm going to cover all the standard villager characters in Cattail Wildwood Story. I only care about Wildwood Story here, and I don't think any of their returning cats had blood family in the previous game, so I think I'm good to just ignore the first Cattails entirely. Anyway, I'm going to cover all the villager cats, that is all the adults. Then after all of them, I'm going to cover all the rival marriage kittens. That means this video is going to be full of big spoilers, both for every villager and for every rival marriage kitten. This is your warning. I'll warn again when we get into the rival kittens. Oh, and one more thing. All of the characters in this game are only ever referred to by they-them pronouns, and 99% of the time, if a character uses they-them, I'm going to assume those are their pronouns, and use those. However, I think that the purpose of they-them in Cattails specifically is more about gender as a non-factor, so I don't strictly stick to they-them when talking about Cattails cats. You know that hypothetical bag people use to teach probability to kids? Inside the bag, there's 2 blue marbles and 2 red marbles, so if you reach in and grab one randomly, there's a 50% chance of getting a blue marble. If there's 3 blue marbles and 1 red marble, then you have a 75% chance of getting a blue marble, so on and so forth. That's more or less how my pronoun usage for Cattails characters works. Bob is a masculine name, so when I go to refer to Bob, my brain automatically fills the pronoun bag with 8 he, hims, 1 they, them, 1 she, her, and then I just kind of grab randomly without looking or caring. So apologies if my headcanons don't match yours, but to be clear about what my headcanon is, it's just that gender is a non-factor, so pronouns are anything goes. With that clarified, let's get started. For the adults, I'm just gonna go alphabetically. That starts us off with Alabaster. He's a solid blue shorthair. Shorthair is represented by capital L and is dominant over long hair, so he could be carrying long hair or not. I'm just putting down a single capital L since we don't know what his other alleles are here. Blue is dilute black. The black locus has a capital B for black, but it also has 2 other alleles, little b for chocolate and B1 for cinnamon. Dominance order goes black, then chocolate, then cinnamon. Again, Alabaster could be carrying anything here, so I'll just leave it blank past the first capital B. To dilute that black into blue, we'll need 2 little d's. This is because little d is the most recessive allele on its locus, with the non-dilute capital D being dominant over it. So, since he can't carry anything, 2 little d's it is. And lastly, they're not a tabby. Tabbies are given stripes by the grace of the capital A allele, which is dominant to the recessive little a allele. Since little a is the most recessive allele on its locus, like dilute, he has to have 2 copies. Alabaster also doesn't have any white markings. White markings are represented by capital S and co-dominant over the non-white allele W. That same locus also has WD, which stands for white dominant. That one turns a cat fully white and is dominant. Duh. That means Alabaster has to have 2 W alleles since he doesn't have any white. This gene is going to come up later, so I might as well cover it now, even though Alabaster doesn't have it. The inhibitor allele, capital I, interacts different with tabbies versus non-tabbies. On non-tabbies, inhibitor creates smoke. On tabbies, inhibitor creates silvers. Alabaster is neither, so they have 2 little eyes instead, all done. After Alabaster is Bob, my boy! Bob is another solid short hair, but this time he's chocolate and non-dilute. Dilute chocolate is lilac, which Bob is not. That means instead of 2 little d's, he'll be getting a single capital D, and he could be carrying dilute next to it, or not, so we'll leave it blank. He may look like he has stripes on his head there, but it's pretty easy to tell a true tabby from a cat who's just ghosting. A lot of solid cats are born with faint stripes in their head, tail, and so on, and usually this goes away with age, but sometimes they stick around. I guess Bob just never outgrew his. Solid and short hair are the same for Bob as they were on Alabaster. However, being chocolate, Bob is going to get a little B on his B locus instead of a capital B. No white, so that's the same as Alabaster, and no inhibitor, also the same as Alabaster. This genetic shit is easy. Hi, completely unscripted Murphy here. I did not realize until I opened the game to get a picture of his full body sprite that Bob has white feet, so we're gonna retroactively, so this is called Berman gloving. I mean, this white paws can happen just from low white, but we're gonna have a little fun. This is called Berman gloving. It's a special white that only happens to the feet. It's recessive. It's WG. It's recessive to everything else we think. on a W locus. He's got 2 of those. Okay, we're okay with that? Okay, great, bye. Buttercup is a tortoiseshell and a short hair, so let me just, yep, we're all good. Tortoiseshell is weird. You see, the ginger locus is sex-linked, which means it's physically located on the X chromosome. Generally speaking, females have 2 X chromosomes, but males only have 1. That means when it comes to sex-linked genes like ginger, females can be homo or heterozygous like normal, but males can only be hemizygous, aka they can only have 1 copy. The allele that causes ginger, capital O, is dominant, with the ginger causing capital O and not ginger causing little o working together to create the patchwork we call tortoiseshell, or calico if they have white. That's why male cats typically can't be tortoiseshells. They can't be heterozygotes, which means no co-dominant interactions. Since we actually don't know the sexes of the cats, I can't assign them their entire O loci. I can assume, because it's most likely, that the tortoiseshells are probably XX chromosome havers, but the non-torties, I don't know. So I'm going to retroactively put a little O question mark next to our 2 current non-torties. If and when someone reads the tortie, I'll mark them as male then. But everyone else, we have no idea. Buttercup, as a tortoiseshell, is our first most likely female, so she'll be getting a heterozygous O locus. That capital O will read for ginger and produce her ginger brindles. The little o isn't reading ginger, and so defaults to whatever's going on the B locus. That black ain't blue, so, like Bob, she's getting a single capital D. No white, no inhibitor, no tabby, and we're looking good to go. Side note, ginger always expresses as a tabby even when there's no tabby allele, being epistatic to little a, but Buttercup has so little ginger that I can't really see what their tabby pattern is, so we're going to ignore that and not cover any tabby pattern genetics on them. Now for Champ! Finally a tabby! But first, boom, short hair, cool. Brown tabbies are actually genetically black. The brown coloration comes from the pheomelanin banding in their agouti hairs. Tabby color is identified from the stripes, not the agouti. Champ's getting at least 1 capital A to make him a tabby. As for what kind of tabby, there's a few modifiers that can affect shape, collected on 2 primary loci. There's mackerel, the tiger-like pattern, and classic, which is kinda swirly and blotchy. They're on the same locus, with mackerel being the dominant capital MC and classic being the recessive little MC. On a separate locus, we have ticked, which is epistatic to the MC locus, and I'll talk more about it later. Anyway, Champ is pretty clearly a mackerel, and so a capital MC he shall receive. He's also not ticked, of course, but I'm not gonna bother writing that down right now. I will write his lack of inhibitor, though. Being black and not blue, Champ isn't dilute. Of course, we don't know what Champ is carrying, so he only gets 1 capital D, and the other allele stays blank. But the other reason I'm leaving his second allele blank here is because I want to be able to tell Champ to his face that he might have a little d. Now for his white. The aforementioned S allele is codominant. SW heterozygotes will have low white markings, aka under 50%, and SS homozygotes will have high white markings, aka over 50%. Champ's white comes in just a few tiny spots, so that's pretty clearly a heterozygote. Very pretty. Next we have my terrible and beloved Char, who is genetically identical to Alabaster except without the dilution. That makes covering her short and sweet, and we can leave her alone, which I think she'd be grateful for. Bing! There we go. All of Alabaster's genes. Now we just flip the switch from dilute to non-dilute by changing these 2 little d's into 1 capital D, and we're looking good. Let's let Charlotte get back to her day. Next we have Coco, who fucked my dad. Our first long hair, isn't that exciting? First off, the familiar stuff. Black, non-dilute, non-tabby, some kind of variant of not ginger, and no inhibitor. However, he's also a long hair, so instead of a single capital L like everyone else so far, he's getting 2 recessive little L's. As for his pretty white pattern, your average tux is a low white, so Coco's getting that heterozygosity. Good for him. Next we have Jump Scare Cat, aka That's My Name. That's my name and you spell it the same way as me. That spelling is very rare. Every time I see her name tag out of the corner of my eye, I startle a little bit. Aka Ellie. That felt weird to type. It felt weirder to say. Ellie, God that's weird, is another long hair, another tortie, and another low white. She's also black. 2 little L's for long hair, heterozygous on the O locus for tortie, heterozygous SW for low white, and a capital B for black. And no inhibitor, so 2 little I's. And non-dilute, 1 capital D minimum. She has bigger ginger patches than Buttercup, but I still can't quite make out what kind of tabby she is, but I can tell that she's not ticked because ticked cats have very few stripes in a limited number of places, and Ellie has a pretty visible thick stripe on her side there, so I'll leave her MC locus unpenned, but she's getting 2 little TAs. Little TA is the not ticked allele, and capital TA is the yes ticked allele that would overwrite the MC locus if she had it. My nemesis, that bitch Ember, is a bold ginger. Again, we don't know anyone's sexes, so she'll be getting at least 1 capital O. Either she has a second one, or there's a Y there, we have no idea. Due to just being ginger, though, we have no idea what their black locus is, so I just won't write one in. He's a short hair, so at least one capital L. He's not cream, which is dilute ginger, so he'll have one capital D. Stay tuned on that one. No white means no S alleles, so WW homozygosity for you. Like I said with Buttercup, ginger cats display stripes whether they're genetically tabbies or not, because pheomelanin and the O locus are weird, so we don't actually know if Ember has any capital A's or not. However, she looks pretty distinctly mackerel to me, so I'm giving her a capital MC for that. Breaking my alphabetical rule here briefly because Spark is Ember's kid, so it feels natural to cover them next. Spark strikes me as cream. He's genetically the same as his parent, except cream is dilute ginger. So here's all of the same alleles, and then we're just gonna, two little D's in there. Looking good. Thank you, Spark. You can go hunt bugs now. Fliss is next on the list. However, another alphabet break is going to happen here because Fliss is canonically twins with Lacey. Not all twins are genetically identical, but I think that's the intention behind making them twins, given that they're always making jokes to the air of, "Are you sure you're meaning to talk to me and not my twin?" and getting mixed up and whatnot. So I think it'll be a fun challenge in this otherwise extremely simple genetic realism video to keep them genetically identical. Whatever I do for one, I do to them both. Wish me luck. I don't need that luck yet, though, because this starts off incredibly easy. White is epistatic to goddamn everything, so who knows what they've got going on under there. They're both short hairs, though, so here's that before I forget. There's 3 ways to make a cat fully white. One is complete albinism, but both twins have heterochromia, and albinos can't have heterochromia since their eyes are always blue, so that's not relevant here. The other 2 ways are white dominant or SS homozygosity. Sometimes, rarely, with the right polygenes and a bit of luck, SS homozygotes born with nothing but tiny van spots on their foreheads might lose them with age and become fully white. However, we are going to keep it simple with white dominant for the twins. Both are getting a single WD allele, and we're leaving it that for now. Garlic is gorgeous, and another long hair, so here's 2 little L's really quick. No written genes for the smushed face, that's both polygenes, and also very sad. Sorry, Garlic. She's pretty clearly a golden shell shaded. The golden series terminology is fucked into hellscape, but she's clearly a golden something. I'm just gonna say shaded and we'll have to live with that. There's 2 primary genetic sources for gold, however, one of them is touted as being the cause of golden shaded like we see on Garlic here. That would be wide banding. It's another polygenetic trait, so I won't write it down. Wide banding is as it sounds. It makes pheomelanin bands of agouti hairs wide, which causes them to appear lighter, creating a goldeny cat. Being a modifier of agouti, though, wide banding doesn't affect stripe color. However, when wide banding is really high, it can eat stripes for breakfast, creating cats whose stripes look lighter than they genetically should be. Ticked cats, see, I told you ticked would come up, only have stripes on their tail, face, and legs. So particularly high wide banding can make a ticked cat look practically solid gold, save the tail tip and often some darkness around the spine and face, which is what we see on Garlic. So Garlic will be getting a capital A for tabby, at least 1 capital TA for ticked. We have no idea what their MC locus is underneath, since ticked is epistatic to it. He also doesn't have any white, so that's 2 W's, and no inhibitor. That pheomelanin is on prominent display, so 2 little I's for her. We can't see Garlic's tail tip, so we can't say for sure what their stripe color is, which means we can't know their B locus, but I think it's safe to say they're at least not ginger golden. Black golden shadens can have faces this light, but I'm bored of all these black cats, and Garlic doesn't have any visible black, so he's getting chocolate. I don't have to, but I can, and I will. So there. Glimmer is our only hairless. We don't know if Glimmer is hairless due to the Sphinx gene or due to the Donskoy gene, but the Sphinx gene is easier than the Donskoy's weird hi-ha-ass complex, so I'm just gonna go with Sphinx. The non-Sphinx allele is dominant, represented by N. The Sphinx allele, the one that causes hairlessness, is the recessive HR. Glimmer will be getting 2 HRs and a sweater. Please, God, give him a sweater. What is he doing out here without a sweater? Anyway, Glimmer's color is a little hard to determine because Sphinx cats don't have hair and their colors show up a bit differently on skin. I'm not that great at identifying Sphinxes, I'm going to be honest with you, but I'll do my best. The pink is a lighter color, but not necessarily white. In fact, I don't think it is white, since white patterns tend to be very sharp on Sphinx cats, but Glimmer's pink blends pretty smoothly into that darker color. Speaking of that darker color, it might be black or blue. I think it's a little light for black, so let's call it blue. I honestly get mixed answers on if tabby is visible on sphinxes. My honest best guess is that it depends. As I've said, tabby comes from agouti hairs, so it shouldn't affect the skin. Indeed, a lot of photos of sphinxes who should show stripes just don't. But there's also pictures of sphinxes who do have visible stripes. Sphinx cats do actually grow hair, it just falls out basically immediately, and some Sphinx cats have, like, peach fuzz. So my assumption is that Sphinx cats with visible stripes probably get them from a very thin, possibly temporary layer of fur. I tend to see Sphinx kittens having stripes more often than Sphinx adults, and maybe that's coincidence, but maybe it's related to, I don't know, kittens having more peach fuzz or something. That's my best guess. Sphinx cat owners and breeders, fill me in on this. Anyway, what we do tend to see even on stripeless tabby sphinxes is a general lightening of the underside. I do not know why. I can loosely and uncertainly conclude that Glimmer is probably a blue tabby of an unknown pattern. We're leaving the L locus blank because Sphinx's HR allele is epistatic to it. Obviously, we can't see her hair length if her hair doesn't exist. Capital B for black, 2 little d's to dilute it to blue, a capital A for that tabby, but we have no idea what their modifiers are. I don't know if we can tell if he's silver or not. I am going to say no, he's not silver. Little eyes only for Glimmer, I think. Jag, my boy! I love Jag so much. He's also super interesting genetically. So far, we've used a lot of capital B's for black and a lot of little b's for chocolate. Those dilute to blue and lilac, respectively. B1 for cinnamon, however, dilutes to fawn. To be cinnamon, Jag needs to have 2 B1s on her B locus. Then, to dilute it to fawn, she needs 2 little d's. And of course, being stripeless, Jag will also have 2 little a's. Short hair, no white, no inhibitor. We don't know what his TA or MC locus are because he's not a tabby. He has at least 1 little O, but we don't know what else because we don't know his sex. Next cat. Crampy is a blue-silver tabby with pretty distinct mackerel markings. I understand that mackerel is ironically the more classic stripe pattern, but I'm still a little sad at the lack of classics in this game. Oh well. Capital B for black, dilute it to blue with 2 little d's, looking good. Now I'm giving him at least 1 capital A to make him a tabby, modified by at least 1 capital MC to make him a mackerel. He has to have 2 little TAs too, since he's not ticked, but I'm not going to bother to write that in, and he has at least 1 capital I for inhibitor. Neat! We can't know for sure if Crampy has no white, given that the muzzle is a common place for it, and his is, occupied, but I don't see any on the rest of him. Oh, and he's a long hair, that's 2 little L's, and at least 1 little O is either accompanied by a second little O or a Y chromosome, we don't know. I have it on decent authority that the mask is not genetic. So let's move on. Phantom is interesting. We're finally getting to that inhibitor I've been on about, a lot more prominently than on Crampy. Remember, a tabby is identified by their stripes, so Phantom is a black tabby, but not a brown tabby, and that's because they're silver instead. Phantom's got, well, Phantom's short hair, let's get that out of the way. Okay, Phantom's got at least 1 capital B to make their stripes black, then at least 1 capital A to make them a tabby. After that, the brown gets its pheomelanin deleted from existence by at least 1 capital I allele. That makes him silver! The reddishness on their nose is tarnishing. It happens to silver sometimes. I've read that it's more common on heterozygotes, but also that it's connected to polygenes and selective breeding probably. It doesn't matter here one way or the other. Phantom's tabby pattern is spotted. Spotted tabbies are mackerel tabbies being affected by large amounts of spotting polygenes. I don't generally write those down in these videos, so we'll just note that they're spotted. Canonically, Phantom is a bangle, which is why they've got out those weird additional polygenes turning those spots into rosettes. Again, nothing to write down for this since it's all polygenetic, but it's still neat. I'm not sure if Phantom has any white. The stripeless light underside could be piebald, or it could just be a lighter underbelly. I don't see it cutting off the stripes, which piebald would, so I'm going to just say that it's just their belly being lighter. That's 2 W's for Phantom, but if you think it's piebald, then, yeah, sure, give him an S or whatever. The lovely Rosemary is our first point. Hooray! She's seal point, which is a fancy way of saying black. So, capital B, capital D, and before I forget, capital L. Rosemary's a short hair. No white, no inhibitor because she's not smoke, no tabby, and thus no known tabby modifiers. Awesome, let's talk point. The points are on the albino locus. There's 3 of them, but I'm ignoring Mocha because it's brand new and extremely rare. Sepia is the CB allele, and Siamese is the CS allele. They're incompletely dominant with each other, and together they make mink. Both are recessive to the no funny business capital C, though. All previous cats have had at least 1 capital C on them, since none were points or albino. Rosemary, however, is definitely a CS-CS homozygote. Her eyes are blue, and that can only happen either thanks to white, which she doesn't have, or due to being a Siamese. Siameses always have blue eyes. Siamese is also temperature sensitive, and she's pretty cold, which isn't a locus I can write down, but I think that's neat. We don't know her sex, so she's just getting 1 little O because she's not ginger. Okay, who's next? Oh, fuck yes, it's Talon! Finally someone complicated! Long hair, 2 little L's, cool, cool, cool. Now, let's get into the meat of these potatoes. Talon is a tortie, so that's 1 capital O for her ginger bits and 1 little O for her non-ginger bits. Actually, technically she's a calico, because she also has low white, which is what's causing those blue eyes. That's SW heterozygosity for Talon, and being non-dilute, that's at least a single capital D. But if she's not dilute, then what's up with that gray modeling? That, my friend, is smoke. Talon's got at least 1 capital I for inhibitor, and if she's smoke, then genetically, she's not a tabby. That's 2 little A's for Talon. Ginger always displays stripes even when it's genetically little a, so when inhibitor interacts with ginger, it always looks silver. This is super cool to see on smoke torties like Talon, even if she doesn't have all that much visible. Anyway, smoke tends to leave a ghost pattern that lets us see what stripe pattern a non-tabby's hiding under their little A's, but I can't see her flank too well, so I can't tell what her stripe pattern is that she's ghosting. It's also harder to see on long hairs anyway. I'll leave her tabby modifiers blank. Now's a good time for my obligatory we don't know that much about cat eye color genetically with a handful of exceptions disclaimer. I've talked about a few of those exceptions already. The reason I'm bringing this up now is, yeah, I don't have an explanation for that. Alexandria's Genesis, I guess. Let's see how many of my audience are old enough to know what that is. Jokes aside, we're just gonna ignore the purple eyes. Zephyr's just wearing colored contacts, okay? He seems like the type. Anyway, Zephyr is another brown tabby, capital B for black, capital D to stay that way, and then capital A to get brown about it. We have a good view of Zephyr's flank, and I don't see any stripes, but he's definitely brown tabby from the face and gray stripe ass spine gradient thing, so that's pretty distinctly ticked to me. So he'll get a single capital TA hiding whatever's on his MC locus, so we'll leave that one empty. Zephyr's a long hair, he has no white and no inhibitor. Looking good, big guy. Lastly, we have... And with that, all the adults are done. Spoilers ahead for all rival marriages and kittens. Alabaster and Fliss have poor little Salem, who was cursed at birth to wink forever. Salem is more or less genetically identical to Alabaster, being a blue solid short hair. However, unlike Alabaster, Salem has low white. Alabaster can't carry white, as the white causing S is codominant with the not white causing W. However, Fliss, as we established, is white dominant. She only needs a single WD to be fully white, and her second allele on this locus can be anything. So I'm going to give her, and by extension, Lainey, a single S allele to hide beneath their WD. She passes it on to Salem, giving them low white. Neither parent has ginger, and neither does Salem, so Salem will be our Cattails standard little O / who knows. Bob and Buttercup got silly and named all of their bouncing babies B names to match themselves, a move I admire greatly. We have Basil, Bew, and Bubby. First of all, because Buttercup is an XX haver due to being tortoiseshell, I'm going to fill in Bob's... Well, I'm not going to fill in his second O locus allele because he doesn't have one. I'm going to remove the possibility of a second O locus allele entirely from the question by sticking a Y in there instead, just for breeding with Buttercup purposes. Basil is the simplest genetically because they're just a smaller Buttercup, so here's all of Buttercup's genes, with one exception. Since Bob is chocolate, there's no way for Buttercup to be homozygous capital B here, since Bob has none to give. Strictly speaking, Basil should be capital B blank because Bob could be homozygous little b, or carrying cinnamon, and thus Basil could be capital B or capital BB1, but I honestly couldn't give less of a fuck, so Basil's heterozygous capital B now, otherwise they're just mama. Being a tortie, they had to have gotten a capital O from one parent and a little o from the other. Buttercup's the only parent with a capital O, so that's where that's from. Bob only has little o to give, so that works out perfect. I'm not going to bother fussing with loci these kids' parents have nothing special for, by the way. We know neither parent is white, inhibitor, we can't see their tabby modifiers, whatever. Bew is similarly more or less identical to Bob. That is, a solid chocolate short hair. We can copy-paste Bob's genes down for Bew. What's interesting, though, is that Bew had to have gotten the second chocolate allele from somewhere. That means Buttercup is carrying a little B for chocolate underneath her capital B for black. Or it means she's carrying B1 for cinnamon and it's hiding underneath one of Bob's chocolates, but again, these are simple trees. I'm gonna Occam's razor with these genotypes. Either Bew has XX chromosomes and got a little O from either parent, or Bew has XY chromosomes and just got a single little O from Buttercup. Either way, no ginger. Bubby is probably the most difficult cat we're going to cover here today because they're the least realistic design-wise. Being a result of codominance between the yes ginger and no ginger alleles, tortoiseshells can only be a combination of ginger or cream and a B locus color. Bubby, however, seems to display both black and chocolate alongside his ginger. Hypothetically, this could result from chimerism, which is when two embryos fuse in development, but I'm not a fan of using those in these types of videos. I'd rather find a trickier solution. It's just more fun for me that way. My kind of default trick for when I see a tortie design that seems to have a brownish color in addition to the black and ginger is to say that the brown is the tabby stripes of the ginger and just looks kind of dark. Most cat designs are pretty stylized, so this works fine most of the time. However, we can clearly see Bubby's ginger stripes, and they're not the brown bits. My best estimation, then, is to pull up pics of real chocolate cats whose color approaches and could easily be mistaken for black, and beg my audience to buy that Bubby might just be genetically a tabby. That also doesn't work. Not only is that clearly not the same pattern we see on the ginger, but also both of his parents are non-tabbies, so he can't get a capital A from anywhere. If this was a Warriors family tree video, I'd fight tooth and nail. But it's not. Warrior cats are novel characters with rare and inconsistent visual designs, but Cattails' characters' appearances are concrete sprite work, and it's a smaller tree in a lower effort video, so fine. You beat me, Bubby. You can be a chimera. There's a couple of ways to skin this cat. Either Bubby's mixed black and chocolate tortie, or Bubby's mixed chocolate and black tortie. Hell, he could even be mixed chocolate tortie and black tortie. I don't really care either way, as I'm already feeling defeated, and it's easier just to copy the genomes we already have, so I'm going with mixed chocolate and black tortie. One of his genomes is the same as Bob, but he's getting his second little B from Buttercup, just like Bew. His other genome is the same as Buttercup's, however, we can see his underlying stripe pattern more clearly than on Buttercup or Basil thanks to his bigger ginger patches, and that ginger looks mackerel to me. That means one of the parents needs to have at least one capital MC. It doesn't matter who he gets it from, but I'm gonna give it to Buttercup since she's the only one it stands a chance of even remotely visible on. Only the tortie genome has this capital MC for sure though, as the chocolate genome doesn't have any visible striping. As for the tortie itself, same process as Basil. As for the non-tortie chocolate genome, same process and uncertainty as Bew. Oh, shoot, look, Bubby's tail is short. I always just assume Bob lost his in some kind of fishing incident, but if Bubby's is stubby too, I think it's genetic. Let's cover that really quick. Similar to hairlessness, stubby tails have more than one genetic cause. The two that come to my mind because they're the two I know the best are Manx and Japanese bobtail. Both are incompletely dominant, however in Manx's case that's because it's homozygous lethal. Japanese bobtail is just shorter and curlier when homozygous. I'm tempted to go with Japanese bobtail just because bobtail, come on. The other two kittens have full-length tails, I'm pretty sure, so if Bob is a Japanese bobtail, he'd be a heterozygote. His tail looks tiny, but not really curly or kinky, so that checks out. If he's a Manx, then he's definitely a heterozygote because he's not dead. I'll go with Japanese bobtail for the pun. Capital JB causes that little pom-pom tail, and little JB doesn't. Bob's a heterozygote with both. So is Bubby, he's getting his dad's capital JB, but a little JB from Buttercup, as her tail is full-length and she only has little JBs to give. Murphy, make sure you put something in the fucking visual about how hard it was to say all these Bs. Basil and Bew also each got one of Buttercup's little JBs, but as their tails are full-length, Bob gave them his single little JB instead. It looks like Bubby's tail is black, so I'll be giving that heterozygosity to his tortie genome. No clue about the chocolate's tail genes. Woo! Okay, that was a lot. Moving on to Ellie and Champ's kiddo, Aster. Much simpler. Due to Ellie being a tortie and thus heterozygous, Champ's getting the hemizygous treatment instead. Here's a Y to go alongside their little O. He then immediately gives that little O to Aster because Aster is a calico and needs one little O and one capital O, and Ellie has the only capital O to give. And give she does. Aster is a long hair. So is Ellie, which is great because she can give Aster one of her little L's. Champ is a short hair, however. This means he has to be carrying a long hair little L underneath his short hair capital L. He gives it to Aster, letting her be long hair. She's not a tabby either. Again, Ellie has nothing but non-agouti little A's, and Champ can simply be carrying one under his little A. Aster has some nicely visible mackerel striping on her ginger bits, which can come from Champ, as he already has a nice capital MC ready for the giving. Aster's low white. Both her single S and single W could have come from either parent, as both of them are also SW heterozygotes, so it doesn't really matter who gave which. That's Aster. Hooray! Now let's move on to the fursona of that one creepy girl from the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, Jack. Jack is basically Talon copy-pasted on down, with a very interesting exception I'll talk about in a minute. Alas, due to Talon's tortiness, I must slip Crampy a Y chromosome under the table. Crampy only has little O to give, and Jack is a tortie, so their capital O is coming from Talon. Jack's low white, and only Talon has any S's to give, so he'll be getting her single S and one of Crampy's W's. Both parents are long hair, and so is Jack, so that works out. Just little L's across the board for this tiny family. Both parents have inhibitor, however one of them is Smoke and one of them is a silver tabby. Jack also has inhibitor, but she's a Smoke. That means she needs two little A's. Talon only has little A's, so that works out fine. Crampy can also give a little A if he's carrying it under his capital A, so now he's heterozygous on this locus. That lets Jack be Smoke. I'd like to zoom in real small on something here. There. Right there. Look at Jack's leg. Do you see that? On long hairs, Smoke tends to just kind of fluff up and seemingly become a mess of light and dark, but when we can make out a pattern, Smoke follows the underlying tabby pattern, creating quote-unquote ghost stripes. We can see this on Talon's head, where they're black and gray and make a tabby M-like pattern over their forehead. We can't see most of Jack's pattern very well, black or ginger, but right here, I can see a single stripe, and I think it's a rosette. Given that we can clearly see Crampy has plain, non-spotty mackerel stripes, I think it's safe to say that Talon's got the Bengal ancestry here. All tabby patterns have the M she's ghosting, and her chest is doing the standard long hair smoke lightness thing, so without a good view of her flank, we don't have any way to discern her stripe pattern. She could very well be rosetted, or possibly a classic or tick tabby, hiding rosettes. Remember, spots, rosettes included, are mackerel stripes modified by countless polygenes, so if Talon's not a mackerel, she can easily hide rosettes. Tick would do the same thing. Quite frankly, so would being a puffy longhair even if she was ghosting mackerel. For the sake of making a decision, I am going to make Talon classic, partially because we haven't had one yet, and partially because I like designing really big cats as classic tabbies. That means Talon, underneath her two little A's, is getting two little MCs. I won't write it out since it's polygenes, but her little MCs are epistatic to her secret hidden rosettes. Jack is getting Talon's invisible spotting and rosette polygenes. However, to make them visible, she's also getting Crampy's capital MC allele. Since Talon only has little MCs to give, Jack's second allele here has to be little MC, making him heterozygous on this locus. As for Smoke itself, both parents have at least one inhibitor, so he could have gotten it from either, or both. Is that a smiley face? Did Crampy put a teeny tiny smiley face in their kid's mask? That's kind of adorable, actually. For the final rival marriage, we have Spark and Lainey's kids, Aurora and Lux. They have the same phenotype, so I'll write their shared genotype the same way I write out Lainey and Fliss's. Both of them are cameo. That's the fancy word for red silver. The difficulty with them is actually that their genes are a little too easy to achieve, and that there's 100 different ways we can go about making this work. For brevity, I'm only going to cover one route, but know that what I'm going to do here is not the only method that works. Remember, Fliss and Lainey are twins, so whatever we do to Lainey for her kids, we have to do to Fliss too. We already know that Fliss and Lainey both have an S allele next to their WD. Spark has two W's since he has no white. Aurora and Lux don't seem to have any white on them, which would be impossible, sadly, since while they can get one of their W's from Spark, Lainey would have to give them either their WD, which they definitely don't have, or their S. Thankfully, these are some very stylized cameos whose silver is practically Snow White, so I think I can suspend my disbelief that their piebald is restricted to the muzzle or toes or something and just blends into the silver. Their leathers are pink enough for it. That does raise the question of silver, though. Salem, Fliss's kid, isn't a smoke, so they have no inhibitor. That means Fliss and Lainey have at least one little eye allele that Fliss gave to Salem. Spark only has two little eyes, so he can't be the one to give Aurora and Lux their silver. That means Fliss and Lainey must be heterozygous on this locus. One little eye for Salem, and one capital I for Aurora and Lux. Since Ginger always displays tabby even when not a goatee, we don't know if Aurora and Lux are tabbies or not, just like with Spark. That means the entire A locus is gonna stay unfilled here. We do, however, know that they're expressing the mackerel pattern. There's no reason Fliss and Lainey can't be hiding a capital MC, but since Spark already has his on full display, I'll just have him pass this down for simplicity. We also know that they're ginger, which requires some fuckery. Again, the following is not the only way to puzzle this out, but it's the first way that came to my mind, and so that's what I'm going with. Spark is getting the Y chromosome. Their ginger comes from just a single capital O. Alabaster's also getting a Y chromosome, and his ginger is coming from the single little O. Fliss and Lainey are going to counter them with dual XX chromosomes. Salem needs at least one little O. That means either she gets one from each parent, or she only gets one from Fliss. Either way, Fliss needs a single little O to keep Salem blue. On the contrary, Aurora and Lux need at least one capital O. That means they either get one from each parent, or they only get one from Lainey. Either way, Lainey needs a single capital O to keep Aurora and Lux cameo. That means that underneath their white dominant, Fliss and Lainey are calicos. They're heterozygous capital O little o. And I think that's pretty neat. Oh, fuck, and also Aurora and Lux are short hairs. Whew, didn't forget. Fun fact, having twins can run in families. There's some unidentified genetic or epigenetic component that makes a higher likelihood of having twins heritable. I'm willing to bet that whatever it is, Fliss and Lainey have it, and Aurora and Lux really are identical twins, just like their aunt and mama. What a cute thought for you. Another fun fact is on my main save file, I married Lainey as a ginger tabby, and our kids were also cameos. When I first gave her the rose, she said she wanted to go out on an adventure, so I immediately took her on as a buddy. We started in her favorite spot, to the east of the town center, where I'd proposed. Then we went down to the beach, my favorite spot, and hunted all evening. We ran in circles, chatting, laughing, enjoying each other's company. Well into the night, we found this beautiful puddle reflecting the moon, where we shared our first kiss. Both excited, elated to be in each other's arms, we found our way back to my den, where I did the sleep animation to roleplay a beautiful night, full of passion, full of love. And the next morning I woke up to this.
Hi. I know you're really busy, but I wanted to invite you over to hang out at my place, if you ever find the time. I'm sure Lainey wouldn't mind having a visitor. I'll try to pick up around the place first. Fliss.
So I went to talk to Fliss like she requested, and she immediately threatened me. So that's all the Cattails characters. Hooray! The video's over and we can all go home. Yup, that's the end. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye-bye! You're still here? But we covered everyone already. Why are you still here? What do you mean the video hasn't ended? That's all the characters. We're done. We're done, right? Uh-oh. Yeah, as I was playing my main save file, I noticed a couple of pairs that I was surprised to find don't get together. Their personalities match up decently well, I think, and they're marriageable, so shit, why not get them together? I don't know enough computer coding to make a mod, but I know biological coding, so here you go. You've entered the Headcanon Hell Hour secret section of the video. Congratulations! The two pairs I've got here are Garlic x Phantom and Zephyr x Rosemary. Garlic and Phantom both kind of keep to themselves in a way I think they'd appreciate from each other. Garlic has always seemed like kind of an angstier, more blunt version of Buttercup, what with always putting herself down instead of even attempting to hold anything resembling a respectful conversation. I can easily see her getting a similar character arc to Buttercup, enjoying Phantom's quiet company, eventually learning from them, and feeling more comfortable at herself as her skill increases and she finds something to be proud of. Meanwhile, Phantom's kind of amused by the snarky remarks and appreciates Garlic's developing sense of humor. Eventually, Phantom falls in love, and Garlic shuts the fuck up for once in her godforsaken life. Also, they're a golden shade and a silver tabby. I've gotta get them together about it. They make chinchillas! Chinchillas! Their bouncing baby chinchilla is Scarab, the gentle sort and not much of a people person. They're not the brightest and can be somewhat sensitive about that, but they warm up quickly to folks who enjoy the finer things in life, like poetry, flowers, and pretty bugs, which of course they catch themselves. The trend in Cattails' rival kittens seems to be pick one parent's genome and copy-paste it while the other parent does. I don't know, something probably. And while I intend to have a little more fun than that, I don't see a reason to buck the formula completely. So Scarab is getting Garlic's genome as a baseline, a long-hair tick tabby with insanely high widebanding and no white. As fun as it would be to make Scarab chocolate too, this art style is already hard enough for me to paint, and there aren't enough references of chocolate chinchillas, so I'm bringing in Phantom's capital B to spare me. Since I've decided Garlic only has little b's to give, that makes Scarab a capital B little b heterozygote. They're expressing black, but they are carrying chocolate. I keep saying chinchilla. What is a chinchilla? A chinchilla is a genetically golden shaded cat who also has inhibitor. Remember, golden shaded is the result of super high widebanding chomping the stripes off a tick tabby. Widebanding is, well, bands that are wide, specifically pheomelanin bands, and inhibitor deletes pheomelanin from bands. So if the cat has super high widebanding and inhibitor, those white bands are now pigmentless, colorless, which makes the cat a near uniform white with a stripe-colored tail tip instead of golden shaded's near uniform gold with a stripe-colored tail tip. In addition to Garlic's capital TA for ticked, plus one of Phantom's little TAs since that's all he has, Garlic's unwritten super high widebanding polygenes, and either parent's capital A for a goatee, Scarab is also getting Phantom's capital I for inhibitor. This turns off all that pesky goldeny pheomelanin and leaves them, of course, chinchilla. To be long hair, Scarab needs to be homozygous little l, which means they need a little l from either parent. Garlic only has little l's, and short hair Phantom simply has to carry one. Though it's not guaranteed, it's likely that Scarab is carrying Phantom's capital MC underneath their ticked, and along with it, quite possibly some very interesting Bengal rosette polygenes. Ooh, fancy. Secondly, we have Zephyr and Rosemary. Rosemary is a huge gossiper and always keeping tabs on the rest of the colony. Zephyr, on the other hand, is apparently a celebrity. Honestly, I see them as kind of an enemies to lovers. Their relationship starts out poorly as Rosemary is constantly spying on Zephyr, trying to get juicy gossip, and generally being an annoying paparazzi type. Eventually, Zephyr, with the player's advice, decides to confront Rosemary and just ask her to stop. She confesses that she follows Zephyr around because his life is so much more interesting than her own, and she'd be depressed just keeping to herself. So, Zephyr agrees to take her around on his marvelous and very interesting exploits, if she tags along as a sidekick, not as a paparazzi. She agrees, and the two bond. Meet Jazz, a flippant and terminally extroverted little troublemaker. Jazz means well and wants to be everyone's friend, but has a hard time deciphering when it's time to drop kayfabe and let the joke go. I'm intimidated to make Jazz a Lynx point because I'm not great at drawing those even in my own style, but I'm doing it anyway. Ta-da! Jazz is a short hair. Rosemary can pass her single capital L, but Zephyr is a long hair who only has little L's to give, so Jazz will be heterozygous at this locus. Lynx point is just a fancy term for a tabby with point. In order to be a tabby, they'll need at least one capital A. Rosemary only has little a's to give, so Jazz will have one of those too, but Zephyr will be giving them that capital A. To be point, Zephyr will need to carry something on the C locus. Doesn't really matter what, CS, CB, or a little c for full albino, but for simplicity, and because I'd like Jazz to inherit Rosemary's eye color, Zephyr will carry CS. That makes him a capital C, CS heterozygote. Jazz gets that, and one CS from Rosemary as well. I'm making my future artist's life a little easier by giving Jazz Zephyr's ticked. They have at least one capital TA from Zeph. Homozygous? Heterozygous? Rosemary's stripes are invisible, so we have no idea. I'll just leave it blank. Okay, now we're at the end of the video. Thank you for watching. This was a fun way to procrastinate the other videos I have lined up and paint some kittens. I'll see you on whatever's next. Bye-bye!